Hi, everyone. Good afternoon.
Hey, everyone. It's wonderful to have everyone here. My name is Jared Kolb, and I am Program Director with the My Main Street Community Activator Program. I'm joined with my colleague, Cecile Roslin, who's the Project Officer on the Community Activator Program. And we're thrilled to be here with you today. I am, want to just cover a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. I want to just start by, of course, letting everybody know that the session is available. We have a live translator, and the session's available in French. To do that, you just need to click on the bottom under Interpretation and choose French. The session's also got some live captioning, which you can turn on and off through the options again at the bottom. Today's session will be recorded, and our goal is to be able to share the session as well as the recording. Should be online on the website by the end of the week. And we'd also ask that you hold your questions until we're through the presentation itself. And we've got a big chunk of time in the last 30 minutes to go through Q&A style section. If we could just move to the agenda. Oh, that's me. Hey there. In terms of the agenda, we've got the welcome and intros, and then we move into the presentation and then the Q&A at the end. Before going into the session itself, I do want to acknowledge that today that the meeting is happening on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. I'm, in terms of the struggle as a member of the settler population, I'm really committed to supporting children and families right across Turtle Island and Canada. So with that, we'll jump into the session. So My Main Street, where Cecile and I are coming to you at the, really at the tail end of year one and moving into year two, and that's really what we're here today to talk about, is to dive into year two of the program. For those of you who have attended a session before, you know that My Main Street, of course, is a little more than $23 million investment from the Government of Canada through the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario to help drive business and restore vibrancy to local communities across Southern Ontario in the aftermath of COVID-19. Our overall program is focused on supporting a huge number of organizations and businesses and helping to create new jobs and maintain jobs as well across Southern Ontario. I say that, of course, the program is focused on Southern Ontario, excluding the city of Toronto.
Sorry, Jared, I can't see your screen. Are you sharing the presentation?
Well, I appreciate you telling me that. And I will go ahead and share it. So bear with me for 1 second. Can you see that, Cecile?
Yes.
Great.
Well, I can see your computer with it too, but
oh, great.
There we go.
Right on. Thank you. Wonderful. So in terms of the individual objectives of the program, we're really focused on revitalizing main streets and small businesses. We're trying to take a data-driven and customized support for main streets and businesses across the program. On our side of the Community Activator, we're really zeroing in on placemaking, in particular to support and attract visitors and enhance vibrancy. And we really want to strengthen Ontario Main Street neighborhoods. Again, if you're familiar with the program, or if you're not, there are two streams. We're, of course, today here talking about the Community Activator piece. And I want to also recognize our sister organization, the Economic Developers Council of Ontario, who are overseeing the Local Business Accelerator, which is focused on supporting starting and growing of local businesses through a variety of supports. In terms of the Community Activator itself, and Cecile, feel free, to kind of jump in on this. The overall program, we're really targeting an investment of $8 million over 2 years to support placemaking activities across Southern Ontario, of course, excluding the city of Toronto. They have their own program. Supporting projects that revitalize neighborhoods and reimagine public spaces. And we're really trying to prioritize projects that support sustainable placemaking strategies and that are designed to create economic and social benefits for equity-seeking groups. What is placemaking? For some of you, this may be a new term, really we're taking an approach here that we're working to ask people to collectively reimagine and reshape public space to maximize its shared value. We're looking to support local placemaking projects that make a meaningful difference in local communities, drawing people out, strengthening feelings of connection and inclusion, and spurring economic activity. In terms of the overall projects that we're funding, they come in 3 buckets. One is events and activations. The second is around community improvements. And the third is policy and capacity building. You're going to hear us say this a couple times, but with respect to events and activations, these can be short, limited, or they could be longer duration, but it really intended to draw visitors and create a new local offering. This could be something where you're bringing back an old event or an event that's happened in previous years. If you are doing that, we want to see kind of why it's different for 2022, and tell us about how you're hitting on our funding principles, which we'll talk about in a second. With respect to community improvements, so we're really referring to above grade improvements to a specific geographic area that'll enhance its physical and visual appeal and draw people in and increase feelings of safety and connection and community enjoyment. And then finally, around policy and capacity building, we are trying to zero in on the kinds of strategies that you and your own local community are working on to facilitate a focused and deliberate path to revitalizing or strengthening a downtown or commercial district. In terms of eligibility, there's a few ways to cut this question of eligibility. When it comes to eligible applicants, we are really trying to cover broad breadth of nonprofits, which could be municipalities, a local or regional government. It could be a business improvement area could apply, an indigenous governing body or development corporation, a federally or provincially incorporated not-for-profit, or a community organization who may not be incorporated but applies with an eligible organization above. Projects need to happen and take place in a very defined geographic area. And so this is really trying to zero in on a main street. Now, what a main street looks like for one community is going to be different than for another. In a small town versus a suburban, strip mall versus a very busy, urban center. We encourage you to define, your main street, within the context of your project and your application. Funding can't be used to support programming across multiple, or I should say across an entire municipal jurisdiction itself. We've already talked about how projects have to take place in Southern Ontario, excluding Toronto. Cecile, I think we also talked about in this section, maybe just spending a moment to chat about eligibility when it comes to expenses. Do you want to jump in on that and chat a little about that?
Yeah, sure. So just because we get a lot of questions about eligibility, and I'm sure it's going to come up in our Q&A as well. So if you still have questions, of course, feel free to ask them. But sort of the number one thing to keep in mind is we can reimburse any reasonable expense associated with your project, except for below ground capital costs. So our funder, who is FedDev Ontario, they historically have never funded anything capital, but with this particular project, we really push back because it's very hard to do placemaking without any capital expenses at all. But so where we've sort of had to draw the line is everything below ground is off limits. So that includes things like plumbing. If we have to excavate ground to prepare a site, if we have to lay new electrical wires, We can't buy any land or buildings. And then unfortunately, we also can't perform permanent renovations on existing buildings as well. So those are kind of, I know that's a big funding category, but unfortunately, those are just pieces that we are unable to reimburse. But we can definitely look at any other expenses associated with your program. So things like staff time, or if you've brought in what's like the designers and materials that are needed. We can get creative about how we cover the rest of your expenses, but unfortunately, any of those below ground capital costs are not eligible.
Yeah, great. Appreciate that, and we'll talk a little bit more as we go through this. I'm going to note that with respect to the funding allocation itself, we're able to, through this year 2 funding round, we're ultimately projects are eligible for contributions of up to $250,000. You can apply for a project that's complete, underway, or planned. I need to really underscore, of course, support though is offered in the form of reimbursement against incurred costs. I'll say though that, and we'll talk about this as we get towards the timeline, you can request up to 25% of the total amount that you're awarded in advance. So the remainder will be in the form of reimbursement, but you can apply for an advance if that is required and of interest. We're through year 1 now, and so we left this here just to help to contextualize the overall program. But year 1, of course, was 2021 after June 8th, and 70% of our funding was available for year 1 projects. As it stands right now, 30% of our overall funding, so 30% of 8 million, is available for year 2. And the costs that, of course, you can apply for to be reimbursed will need to, of course, fall within the January 1st to December 31st, 2022 period. 25% of our non-repayable contributions are reserved for communities less than 100,000 people. And so that's another important piece to note in our funding application or allocation. In terms of our principles, we really are aiming to have a portfolio of investments, and there's a variety of principles here. So, you've already seen number 4, at least 25% of total program funds in communities of less than 100,000 people. We also really want to fund a mix of small and medium-sized and large projects, a mix of project types, so events and activations and community improvements and others. We are working to disperse funding geographically across Southern Ontario, excluding Toronto. Zeroing in on, want to help to benefit organizations led by or representing and or applications that substantially address the needs of equity-seeking groups, and also working to support different kinds of organizations. So, small and low capacity or unstaffed organizations, right up to municipalities, across Ontario, Southern Ontario, I should say. In terms of our key dates, of course, our applications are now open. We've had a few applications in already. I should note that we're not adjudicating applications on a rolling basis. Everything, we're not even going to look at them until after February the 1st, when year 2 applications close. We will have a period where our independent assessment committee reviews applications. So that's between February the 1st and March the 1st. And then our goal at this stage is that we will notify successful and unsuccessful applicants in mid to late March. That seems like a lifetime away. It'll be here before we know it. If you're familiar with the first year of the program, we want to highlight a couple things that are new, or modified for year 2. First, in the application form itself, there's going to be an additional field for supporting documents, so including partnership letters, letters of support, or maps. We're going to ask you to bundle it all in one place. We've got a handy way to do that. We've got an additional question specifically for updates to annual recurring events and how they address our funding principles. The other piece is that character counts on our applications will be enforced. And so we've tried to build out, the last time we had a character count max, but the file itself didn't work to limit that max. And so you're still able to submit, you know, a 100-word essay or a 100-page essay if you wanted to. And we took that into consideration. We've corrected those issues, so character counts will be enforced. In terms of the scoring matrix, we are awarding up to 5 points for innovation or for reimagining existing activations. We also want to note that our vision category is now worth twice as many marks as it was in year one. And so, for instance, there'll be 10 points for contribution to sustainable placemaking strategy. That's up from 5, and 10 for benefits to equity-seeking groups, also up from 5. All those points, you know, that those pieces may have gone right over your head. It's something that you don't need to worry about right now. I'd encourage you to take a look at the application guide. All of that is detailed there. And we'll include the links to those pieces in the chat. But yeah, so those are a couple things about what's new in year 2. In terms of the FAQs, Cecile, you want to go kind of back and forth on this one? I'll just kick it off with the first one. We've had a lot of questions, tons of questions in year 1, and we've already had some around year 2. But I'll note that you know, if an organization submits more than one application, will they be judged on their own merits? Yep, totally. Each application will be judged based on, you know, within the overall mix of applications and according to our scoring matrix. And we, as I noted in the funding principles, regional equity is an important component of the program, and meaning that we'll be working to distribute successful recipients across Ontario, excluding Toronto. Cecile?
Cool. I'll take the next question. Can a project benefit or take place on more than one main street? And the answer is Activator projects should focus on a defined geographic area, like a main street, a plaza, strip mall, a specific portion of a trail. Applications that propose to undertake programs in multiple defined geographic areas, they're also eligible. Though I will note that one of the questions worth points is this project focusing on a specific regional, a very specific geographic area. And so if you're trying to target more places, you're probably going to lose points there. So then the rest of the application should try to make up for that point loss. So eligible, but definitely try. I would recommend honing in as much as possible.
Can a project include activities in more than one funding category? Yeah, it certainly can. So you can kind of imagine a community improvement, like a mural that's being installed on the main street, and you know, the applicant also wants to have an event to launch or kick that you know, or unveil the mural. So you'd have a community improvement, and you would also have an event and activation kind of that you're requesting funding for. So yeah, you've got to choose one in the application, and that'll be the one we recommend choosing, the one that has the biggest budget impact, and then, but you know, feel free to include other components as well. Back to capital expenses.
Back to me on this one. Yeah, what kinds of capital expenses are eligible? So we've said anything that's above ground. So supplies related to temporary activities. So we've seen a lot of like building cottages for markets, or portable stages for summer programming in theaters, things like that are okay. Yeah, enhancements to streetscape, landscaping, amenities such as murals, seating, temporary installations, and lighting installations are all capital expenses that are eligible.
Great. What happens, you know, if the project starts or ends outside of the eligibility period? Well, you know, from our perspective, projects, you know, of course, there's a whole variety of different types of projects with different project lengths. And so, yeah, projects can start or end outside of the eligibility period. However, only expenses incurred during the period will be eligible for reimbursement. Cecile?
Right. Should new projects be judged more favorably than completed projects? No, Projects will not be more, new things are not judged more favorably than completed projects. We encourage projects that in any phase of your development to apply, though as Jared noted, for year 2, we did add a component for innovation and sort of reimagination. So if you're submitting with an event that you've put on every year for the last 15 years, it's how will this funding change your event? How will it make it more inclusive to equity seeking groups, or bring more people out, or lower the ticket price, or how will these funds help to make your recurring event different?
Great. Will decisions be made on an all or nothing basis, or will partial funding be awarded? No, we really aim to fund projects in their entirety, though there may be circumstances where partial funding is awarded on a case-by-case basis by our independent assessment committees.
Are matching grants required? Fundraising through the Community Activator program does not require matching contributions. The program can reimburse up to 100% of eligible costs incurred during the eligibility period. Again, the only caveat for that is we can't double reimburse you. So if you also get money from ticket sales or private donors, we can't give you that money back again.
Great. Yeah. Can we apply for funding for annual events we did pre-COVID, or do they have to be new events? Yeah, you can apply to bring back an annual event that was postponed or canceled due to COVID-19, and of course, which meets our eligibility criteria. However, as I mentioned before, we want to know what's new about the event post-COVID-19, and it addresses our funding priorities. So, within that, think about, how does this contribute to a sustainable placemaking strategy for the community itself? How does it benefit groups that have been adversely impacted, in particular through COVID-19? So, equity seeking or deserving groups, and think about innovation. Why is this new? How are we pushing, the envelope on this and trying something new? In terms of the resources and with respect to next steps, the applicant guide, budget template, and application form can all be found at mymainstreet.ca/activator-program. In other words, you can find that on the website. And questions about the overall process, you can write me. We've also got Cecile's email address at the end. With that said, though, I'm going to just move over to the Q&A. I'll stop sharing my screen for a moment, and we'll dive in.
All right, perfect. So I will go through these questions. I've been trying to get to a couple as we go, but let's see here. So first question is, why are we excluding Toronto? I did kind of put a link in the chat about this. Toronto just got its own pool of money, almost equal to our pool of money. So given that, there's lots and lots of programming already, and there is a link in the chat, which I can try to share again at the end, about just all of the various Main Street reactivation going on in Toronto.
Thanks, Cecile.
No problem. I also answered this, but just in case anybody missed it, would an unincorporated business association be able to apply, or unincorporated not-for-profits?
So I think we've noted that we are federally or provincially incorporated not-for-profits are eligible to apply. If you're outside of that as a nonprofit, so your community group, for instance, that hasn't sought an incorporation, you'd have to apply with an organization that is kind of in the mix that we listed. And Cecile, did you also mention a for-profit business there, or was it just nonprofits?
No, there was just two questions about unincorporated not-for-profits, but same thing, for-profit businesses. Just find an incorporated community not-for-profit to partner with and have them be the lead applicant. So you could look at your local libraries, or approach your local BIA, or approach the municipality. But unfortunately, we cannot issue funds to private companies, or not incorporated not-for-profit. So you will have to find a partner to do this with you. Please define a community under 100K. If it's a neighborhood of that size within a larger community, does that qualify?
No. So if you were a neighborhood, for instance, in a larger municipality, then you would kind of fit within the municipal boundary. So that's a really great question. We're talking about a municipality in particular of less than 100,000 people. So it could be a small town though that has its own incorporation that is within a much wider region that has a population of over 100,000. So long as that small municipal entity has less than 100,000, then you'd fit into that bucket.
All right. So what if you have two locations, both on geographic main streets?
If you have two locations, so these are two particular interventions that are within one single main street. Is that right?
That says two locations, both on geographic main streets.
Okay, so potentially two sites on two different main streets. I'll take the question to mean. I think if you were doing the same programming at both sites, that potentially could be a single application. But yeah, these are different geographic main streets. Thanks for clarifying that. Ideally, we are hoping for separate applications for separate main streets. I think you'll receive the kind of highest marks for that. So you'd want to think through two separate pieces. That being said, we're happy to have a conversation about that. Cecile and I have regular office hours, and we're happy to go through the specifics on that. Cecile, throughout this, we'll be sharing that piece.
Yeah, I put it in there already once, but okay. Yeah. How detailed does the budget need to be in terms of line items? Is it really granular down to every cost or material? That's part one of that question. And then part two of the question is they plan to work with a third-party partner and then don't know the details of the consultation fee. Can you just say consultation fee? Is that sufficient?
Yeah, these are great questions. I think the more detail, in the budget, the better. So if you do have your specific line by line, provide us with that. I think that's certainly something that we're able to provide some feedback on as well with respect to the eligible expenses. I can note that now that we're through year one, we can note that there were certain projects that asked for a certain amount of money. We can just say they asked for $50,000, and it turned out, based on our eligibility criteria, only 40,000 was eligible, and so that is where the max that we were, able to offer up in support. So the more data that you're able to provide on your budget, I think the better. That being said, if you don't have that, and this is a good example where, for instance, you don't have a finalized quote yet from a contractor, we'd certainly ask for a best estimate on that, and we're happy to work with you, in terms of as you lock that contractor in.
Perfect. I'll take this one, Jared. Will applications be adjudicated in order of submission? Is there any benefit to submitting early in case funding becomes limited? So first part of that is they're all adjudicated together. I am the one that puts together the packages for the assessment committee, and I do put the package together in order that they were received. However, we don't quite know how it'll get split up, and I won't know that until February 1st, where we can see like the applications that come in. And I know for a fact some of the adjudicators went from the bottom of their list to the top, so I can't control the order that they get read in. There is a benefit to applying early though, and that is, as I'm kind of getting the package ready, if I see something that looks like it might not be eligible or that the assessors will probably want clarification on, I'll have time to reach out to you and get that clarification. Whereas if you do the last day and I miss that, the adjudicators just might not get that clarification. So yes. And then, yeah, I popped our Jared and myself Calendly link in here. I'll try to do that again at the bottom of the chat when we get to the end. Bob noted that a community foundation could and would be happy to partner. So for some of those unincorporated. What is the definition of public space? I noticed you mentioned plazas. That's a privately owned space downtown. Is a privately owned space downtown that's open and accessible to the public eligible.
Yeah, it's a great question, and yes, we'd want to see the context, specifically of that. I think ideally, we're looking for public spaces that are accessible. That's the key piece is that they're accessible to all. And so, when we're thinking through the eligibility, let's say of an event that's happening on a private space, or that's happening in part on a public and on a private space, you want to be thinking about that accessibility piece, and we're going to be really underscoring, and projects will be judged, I think, more favorably for events in this case that I'm referring to that are open to all. So yeah, I think we will allow you to kind of to build your definition in terms of public space, but you'll be wanting to really think about really creating the conditions for accessibility for everyone.
Cool. Is there a limit to the number? Took me all the way to the bottom. A limit to the number of applications for unique projects or for projects spanning multiple geographic areas like BIAs that an organization, municipality can submit? There's a bit to unpack in that.
Yeah, so I would say,
is there a limit to number of applications?
Yeah, to start, no, there's no limit. There's no limit in terms of the number of applications that you can submit. And then in terms of the kind of the secondary piece there, that was around, sorry, can you clarify, Cecile?
That a municipality can submit for different BIAs? There's a few different ways of seeing this question, I think. But
okay, sure. Yeah, again,
no limit is the short answer.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got 8 different main streets and you're, hoping to get an application for each one with a specific project, there's no, I would say that sounds like 8 applications.
Can one organization make more than one application? Yes, please. And again, especially if it's for really different things. I'll use an example of, we've seen a couple of theater companies apply for things they need to upgrade the company, and then also for programming. Those, I think, are really two different things, because the assessment committee might really want to support the programming and might not really want to help them buy new chairs. So yeah, the more different things are, especially keep those on separate applications. Late to the party. Are costs covered for salary?
Yeah, so long as they're in the service of the project. So, we can't pay for just ongoing overhead. As much as I would like to, and as much as we'd like to, it really has got to be project specific. So it would have to be a certain part of the existing staff salary that's dedicated towards this project.
Do you know the percentage of approved applications from the first round?
Oh, good question. I believe the number was close to about 66, about 2/3, just a little more than 2/3 of applications were approved. And so you'll remember, of course, as I mentioned at the outset, that 70% of our funding was available of the $8 million. So about $5.6 million was available in round 1. In this second round, it's about $2.4 million that's available for the total number of applications. That may change, but as it stands right now, we are the budget that we're working with is at $2.4 million.
And then just a follow-up question to the budget. It's okay to list consultation fees. You don't need to break that down further. That's fine. Yeah, we saw lots of applications just said consultation fees.
I will note that, of course, when you submit your invoice to us, if you're a successful recipient, that'll be the place where we'll be, you'll demonstrate the details of that, and who the consultant was and so on, work undertaken.
Okay, perfect. And then, yeah, just clarifying that Hamilton has 13 BIAs, and so the municipality may end up submitting many applications, and we're okay with that. So, Cool. Last question here so far, but feel free to keep them coming. We have until 3 o'clock. We very deliberately leave a lot of time for questions on these. It's just faster than other ways, but double checking, projects can take place indoors.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. I would say that it is possible to take place indoors. Again, you're just going to want to be thinking through the component around accessibility and how people are going to access the space. We're looking at a much bigger funding period with this next round, of course, given that it's January 1st to December 31st. So within that are 4 different seasons with various requirements from a seasonality perspective. So yeah, they certainly can take place indoors.
Perfect. What about churches?
So as an applicant, they're eligible as a charitable not-for-profit organization. So certainly an eligible applicant. And so with that said, just need to think through, what the specifics are around the application itself and what you'll be applying for in the Main Street context.
For salary estimates, thoughts on how to surmise estimates, utilize living wage, minimum wage, industry standards?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I would suggest, what the standards that, you utilize within your organization, please put those forward, in your application and then, be adjudicated accordingly.
How would you view an artist in residence with an offshoot project aim of new murals on a theater?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds really interesting. Again, you're going to want to be thinking through the contribution, to the Main Street community. You'll be thinking about, who the eligible applicant is in that context and what some of the outcomes are, for the community itself. How various organizations and people are benefiting from that. It's I think we saw some really interesting public art projects in the first round, and I think that's will be super interesting again in year 2.
Yeah, and just popping in there, there is a screen on our website of just Activator ideas, and I believe Artist in Residence program was listed under that 3rd category of policy and capacity building. But yeah, there is, that's a good idea. Newly incorporated not-for-profits, less than 1 year since incorporation, is that eligible?
Yep, certainly. We had some deliberation during the assessment committee phase about whether for year 2 we should be asking for audited financial statements or financial statements. In the end, what we opted for in the application, as you'll see, is we ask for your annual budget, and so we stopped there rather than asking for the full financial statements, and that was primarily because of a concern of excluding small and kind of lower capacity organizations, and so we do ask for your the most recent budget total, but we're not asking for financial statements.
Cool, thank you. Noticed in this presentation that murals were listed under capital expenses. Is there a limit to what percentage of the budget can be allocated to capital expenses?
No, there's no limit. One thing we do say in the new application guide is we identify that up to 10% can be applied for evaluation. And I'd say that's the only kind of like limitation on the budget or any kind of constraint. So as far as we're concerned, the whole budget can be for capital costs related. I should say, of course, capital costs that are deemed eligible, so above ground, non-building renovation or land, etc.
I just had a quick look at the application form. Is there an opportunity to accompany it with uploaded background documents? So if you go into the portal where you have to apply, so not just the form, but you'll go into the apply here, there is a mandatory, or not, no, that one is not mandatory. There is a field there where you can upload any supporting documents that you've got. So yeah, it's not on the application itself, but it's in the application portal as a separate document.
Yeah, I'll just again give some background context on this as well. Is that we absolutely in the first round we saw a variety of applicants who listed out a variety of partnerships that were either built because of the project or had been in place and longstanding, or that were new, and so we had a lot of questions from our assessors, from our independent assessors, who wanted to know more. Tell us, we want to know what these partnerships actually look like. And so, in some cases, we saw applicants who were in dialogue with, the Indigenous First Nation, in their wider community, but we didn't know what that looked like. And so we've got a real opportunity here, for this next round is that, if you are working with a First Nation, for instance, there's an opportunity now to provide some more support around that. What does the partnership letter look like? For instance, you can submit it. I would say, in terms of advice here, dazzle us with, your letters of support and, partnership letters. I think that's a really important part of the collaborative nature of the kind of placemaking, the spirit behind placemaking.
Cool. Would an NRP ethnic group not located on a downtown main street be able to apply if they're hosting community events for all, like an Italian community club? Cultural not-for-profit, sorry. Didn't look at the next line. It was already answered there. Yes.
Okay.
And
yes.
Can a cultural not-for-profit apply if they're not on Main Street, but they're hosting open events?
Yep, certainly. Again, you want to think about the Main Street context and that geographic area that you're really targeting, and speak to that in the application. But it could be eligible.
If the focus is on communities under 100,000, is it worth it for an organization from a larger community to apply? I would say yes. It's not the focus. It's just we want to make sure that at least 25% of the funding is going to small communities, because very often small communities are left out of these sorts of things. So it's only 25% is earmarked, which means 75 could still go to larger communities as well.
Yep. Nailed it, Cecile.
Thanks, Jared. Awesome. Is additional rent deemed eligible? So for example, renting an empty storefront for 6 months for an art installation.
Yeah. Rent is a potential eligible expense, specifically related to the event. I think, that sounds right up the in terms of the spirit of what we're trying to do.
Are murals on private property eligible? So private properties located along a main street, they would still be publicly accessible to view, interact with, etc.
Yep, it could be. Again, what we would want to see, I would, playing it forward here is, whoever that building owner is, a chance here to provide a letter of support, for that particular intervention. Show us that, you got your ducks lined up, but no, that's eligible.
We're at the end of the list again. See if anything else pops up. Maybe I'll also just add, try to be as detailed as possible with, those relationships that you've built. We saw, like Jared already mentioned this, that we saw a lot of applications that said, we talked to these people, but then there was no indication to how those conversations shaped the event or changed the event, or a lot of, we hope to hire a local artist rather than we are committed to hiring a local artist. Trying to really make it as specific and thoughtful as possible. And then another question came up. Is there a cost share component?
So if the question is related to matching, like if you need matching grants or anything like that in this process, the answer is no. We covered this kind of earlier in the presentation, but no, matching contributions aren't required for your project here. If you mean something different, though, feel free to add that to the chat. Perhaps while folks are just kind of reflecting so far, I would say that I can, of course, remind everyone that the application deadline is for February the 1st. We are trying to be as diligent as possible with making our time available to be able to answer specific project-related questions. And so you could send an email to mymainstreet@canurb.org. Or you can also book some time with us. And Cecile is noting, our Calendly pages. We want to be as available as possible. I see there's a couple more questions that have come in, Cecile.
Maybe I'll save the common pitfalls till we answer this other question first. If you were successful for round 1, does that increase or decrease, or is it neutral and in favor of a round 2 application?
As far as we know right now, that's it has no bearing. If you're successful in year 1, you very well may be successful in year 2, and really based on the merits of the application. If that changes, we will let the community know. I don't believe it will, but that's yeah. So if you put a banger together in number 1, you can give it another go in round 2 and going forward.
So this is a little more open-ended. Are there any other common pitfalls that folks should avoid?
Yeah, I mean, the one to think about is Cecile noted around the eligible expenses on capital. We did see a number of applications in year 1 around renovations to existing buildings, and just want to really clarify it's just not an eligible expense. The other thing to note is something that has happened a couple times is interventions that are being designed from lots of different geographic areas. It's not the spirit of the current program, and so certainly we know of very busy main streets in various communities that have different cultural segments to it, and that can be considered one long main street, and so just think about how you're kind of thinking through if you are trying to imagine an intervention for lots of different communities on one main street. Try to be really diligent about that. So those are a couple from my perspective. Cecile, how about you?
Yeah, I sort of mentioned on a little earlier about keeping like with like and keeping separate projects. There were a couple of applications that came in that were sort of laundry lists for the whole year, where the assessors might have really liked your Pride activations and might have really liked your Halloween activation, but weren't crazy about some of the other things that happened, and the whole thing didn't go forward because of that. Whereas the community may have gotten their Pride Parade funded that way, and so really just trying to be mindful of how do I say this delicately? Like, don't try to use your very strong equity pieces to push through some of the ones that maybe aren't as in spirit of this funding.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I'll also reinforce on the equity seeking or equity deserving groups piece. We saw applications that were ranked that had a variety of components that were ranked highly, and that in round 1 and that did rather poorly in the equity seeking piece. And that in large part, I think we're really encouraging applicants to think through and bake in a really deliberate and thoughtful approach to various groups and people within your community, who have been adversely impacted through COVID-19, and how you're trying to do things perhaps different coming out of the crisis. And so, a single consultation, for instance, with one group is not going to score nearly as high as really trying to involve groups through the planning process and implementation, ensuring that that they're well represented and are really a part of it and really owning it.
And then just a question to post a link to the recording, because some pieces might have been missed while internet cut out.
Yes. Yeah, so we will be working to we'll be working expeditiously to get the recording and the presentation up on the website, on the My Main Street website by the end of the week, and we'll also make sure to email that out to everybody who registered for the event. And so you'll have that in the coming days.
Perfect. Were there any other questions from this group? Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate the comment, Julia, and thanks, Karen. You know, I'll note that we had some really exciting applications out of year one, and you know, I think with the year one programming, because it came at the end of the year, that helped to constrain, some of the imagination and creativity, and that was fine. That's how the program was built. It's a reimbursement program, so it was largely funding stuff that had already happened, in the year. And so if you were an applicant from year one and you applied and you got funding for year one based on something that you did that was creative and hit on placemaking points, congratulations. As we look forward to year two, this is your chance, I think, to really be bold, to be imaginative, to try something new, to really strike new ground and encourage the community to participate in a different way, encourage your community to come together in a new way. And so, yeah, we encourage you to be bold and really, try to harness the power here of helping to, contribute to not only economic activity but social cohesion and inclusion on our Main Street communities. And so with that, we look forward, to seeing some great applications. I will note we've got a number of upcoming mobilization sessions. Our next one is happening on December the 14th. It was noted in our most recent newsletter. We saw really innovative placemaking ideas there. And then there's more to come in the new year. So with that, thanks, Cecile. And thanks to everybody for participating today, and thanks to the COI team for their dazzling, tech display as always. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.